Hello and welcome to another episode of Jack Amplified. I'm your host, Michael Braithwaite. I have the absolute pleasure and honor of being the CEO at Jack.org, an organization that is primarily focused on the very early intervention and prevention of youth mental health crisis and youth suicide. Every episode, we have incredible guests, and today you are not going to be disappointed. At every episode, we try and tackle different issues that youth are facing when it comes to mental health. This week, I'm really excited. All right, I'm always excited, but I'm more excited because we're talking about body image and eating disorders, something that is just a crucial issue facing so many youth today. We've got two incredible guests today to talk about it, Kenzie and Gabriela. Now, you think, why don't you introduce them, Michael? Well, listen, I want to look for someone who knows these individuals the best. And I've looked all around and wait a second, hey, it's themselves. So I like our guests to really tell us a little bit about themselves and their journey kind of into this space, how they got here. So we're going to do that. And before we introduce the guests, I always want to push you to, if you love this podcast, if you really want to try and amplify the voices, as we're trying to do here, of youth and mental health, please share, like, follow on social media. This is the only way. What we're trying to do at Jack.org really overall is amplify those voices and create this ecosystem of youth and people that support youth across, young people, I should use, across Canada, around the world, to talk about mental health and reduce the stigma, really, and make it okay to be not okay. So without further ado, I want to go over to Kenzie for an introduction, and then we'll go to Gabriela.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Michael, and Jack.org and everything you guys are doing. I'm so excited to be here today. I am a mental health advocate. I talk a lot about mental health, body image, pineapple on pizza on Instagram. I'm a speaker and I write a little bit online. I love talking about things that are going on in culture and things that are going on between us. I have a history of eating disorders and mental health issues, and that's kind of how I got started talking about my life online and kind of treating social media as a diary. But that was years and years ago, before social media is kind of the beast that it is now. And I'm just really passionate and love these spaces where we can talk about these really important issues. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thanks so much, Kenzie. Wonderful introduction. Gabriela, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Also, I'm so honored to be here. Um, I'm a fourth year student in nutrition dietetics in the University of Ottawa, and I got into Jack.org as I did my Be There certificate, and then I translated to be a Jack Talk speaker now for more than 3 years. So this role as a Jack Talk speaker really allowed me to travel across Canada to be able to share mental health resources to all youth in high schools and primaries. So it has been really a fulfilling adventure and so inspiring. And yeah, I'm a certified life and wellness coach. So I'm really, really passionate about empowering people to connect with themselves, find their clarity and truth within themselves, and feeling really fulfilled and just well, so they can all thrive. So mental health is one of my biggest passion, and I can't wait to dive in into today's subject.
Amazing. Thanks, Gabriela. And I had the great pleasure of being on one of your Jack Talks just recently. Phenomenal, powerful, impactful. So thank you for all the work you do. Now, how do we kind of choose the guest listeners? Well, we always kind of look to get a couple guests from different perspectives on things. And today, you both kind of come at this from different perspectives, right? Professionally, lived experience, etc. We'd love to hear how body image and eating disorders show up for young people today?
Mm-hmm. I think today body image and eating disorders show up for young people in really layered ways, right? It's a complex topic. I think youth are more open about mental health than ever. One of the reason being we have those nonprofit organizations like Jack.org that are opening conversation and sharing tools, which is very powerful. But they're also growing up in a culture that is constantly putting bodies on display, and because of social media, we tend to compare ourselves to really unrealistic standards. So a lot of young people end up tying their self-worth to how they look. And when food becomes a role becomes about control or perfection instead of nourishment, that's often where body image struggles and eating disorders begin, unfortunately. So it's not about appearance anymore. It's really about pressure, identity, and really trying to feel good enough. So that's my take on it.
Social media and these digital environments that we're so plugged into since 2020 really are designed to compare. They're not designed to be compassionate or to heal us. They're designed for us to be kind of addicted to these machines, addicted to this infinite scrolling, and in a headspace of comparison. And there is not a single person that I talk to that hasn't been in that headspace of comparison, whether that's someone else living a life that they admire, or someone has a body that they want. And, we found out through Frances Hogan, who is a whistleblower from Facebook, that Facebook had internal documentation that showed that users of Instagram and Facebook, particularly young girls, actually, there was a correlation between their use of social media and their struggles with body image and eating disorders. And they knew about that, and they didn't do anything about it. And so I think with the evidence that we have today, with how plugged in we are to our online worlds, who we follow can sometimes exacerbate the things that we're struggling with inside. So I think we're in this unique space of our life where we're in these digital environments. We need to be really cognizant of who we follow and why we follow them. And the way that so many bodies and messaging is just kind of like forced upon us in these environments. I think those are the unique ways that young people today are struggling with body image and eating disorders.
Thanks for that, Kenzie. Yeah, so some real gems and nuggets out of that. I think is one of the crazy things about online as well is that what's real, what's not real, right? So I think that there's so many ways, angles, different things that you realize that perfect picture that someone's taken of their body has been taken 45 times to maximize lighting, angles, all these different pieces. But in your head, that was a snapshot real quick, and right? Like this is, what's real versus not real. Gabriela, what does growing up online do to the way young people do, like to the way young people see themselves and their bodies?
Yeah, I think growing up online shapes really how young people see their bodies and themselves. I think it's a big factor. But I would love to, explore the positive and challenges ways, right? There's always two face to the middle. On the positive side, social media can help you feel seen, right? In social media, you can find your people and your community and people who look like you, right? Or think like you and share similar experiences and passions. So I think there's that a beautiful community side sometimes that we can find, and that can be really empowering and validating. But there's also another side to it, right? Social media, as Kenzie said, is very focused on appearance. And as we said, there's comparison, there's all these unrealistic expectations, and people now and youth are always exposed to images of perfect bodies and this narrow idea of what does it mean to be fit and healthy. So taking these big concepts and just reducing it to like images or persons or just 30 seconds reels. So on top of that, we in the media realm, we're talking about ads also and health campaigns that are still pushing in 2026, pushing dieting and weight loss as the goal instead of focusing on well-being and health in general. So instead of asking, how do I feel in my body? Youth will start asking, how do I look to others? How do I appear? Is my body reflecting a healthy and fit body? So uh, it's complex. It's social media has positive and negative. Sometimes the negative can overpower it. And over time, that shift of self worth comes from who you are to how you appear, right? So we're more and more with social media going into that external validation instead of seeking internal validation and internal confidence, right? So, yeah.
Oh, Kenzie, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I love to build on that. Gabriela, that was so well said. And I really appreciate you one, like looking at the nuance of social media and that there's positive aspects, community building, and that too, social media is inherently reductive. And I just think that there are two questions that I think giving the youth, giving people who are exploring these platforms, two questions to ask ourselves when we are scrolling and when we get into that headspace or when we're not feeling good and we don't know why when we're on social media. And one, it's how is this message being reduced to fit an algorithm? That's a big one. And two, who is profiting off of this messaging? Those things can kind of help give us some sort of media literacy in this very confusing and complex environment that can kind of help us gauge, okay, maybe a person is selling a supplement and this isn't the totally this isn't a completely honest, message that's directed to me, or maybe it's social media pushing something, like things like what Gabriella touched on, weight loss masked as something that's health focused, or weight loss that's masked as wellness. And I always ask myself those questions: how is this message being reduced for the algorithm to be amplified? So what is being left out of this message? Where's the nuance? And then who's profiting off of this, especially in like with beauty standards, for particularly for women? It's a good thing to ask, and you'd be surprised at what you can kind of come up with.
When you look at kind of bullying around body image and that kind of thing, uh, before social media, there wasn't as many channels. You'd have to do it. You'd actually have to put stand behind something you're saying to someone. And now online, people could just throw it. I remember my youngest, one comment would just send her spiraling of someone she didn't even know. It just would hit her self-esteem hard, right? Of someone just being very cruel around body image. And so what are your thoughts around that kind of online, uh, bullying and what it does to your mental health and body image overall? When people don't have a good sense of body image, how does that affect your mental health? Gabrielle, we're gonna start with you and go over to Kenzie.
Yes, I think, well, for me, I have zero tolerance on bullying on social media. Let's make that clear. um, I think it's really, really important that we we stand strong on our, you know, we stand strong on the fact that bullying is not acceptable on social media and it should never happen. I think um, the unfortunate truth, and the very sad truth is that a lot of people are losing their lives every year because of the bullying online. And I think when you are growing up, you are just discovering yourself, right? You're just trying to figure yourself out, who you are, what you're passionate about. Sometimes you're just not sure about who you are. And then all these people, without really your consent or your right, you didn't ask for their opinions, but because you're exposed on social media, that's the hard reality that you are exposing yourself to all these people and all these uh, opinions that maybe, won't support you. When we're talking about bullying, they're crushing you, they're putting doubts in your head, they're confusing you, right? When youth are just in this phase of discovering and building themselves. So I think it's really, really, really hard to discover yourself. And many youth, they don't know what they want to do in life. They're in this career uh reflection and exploration and discovering with their passions. And then, it there's so many factors, right? We can say about like economical factors that you're just trying to figure out how to live, but so many youth are in the survival mode already. So they're already facing so many societal changes and pressures. They're living anxiety and stress and um, just doubts in their heads, just the internal conversation with themselves. And then social media comes in and expose you to so many opinions, so it can be challenging to not only face your own thoughts, your own demons, your own all of that, and then adding other people's judgment, opinions. I think it's a lot. And because you're still discovering yourself as youth, as you said, you're not so grounded in who you are because you're still discovering it. So how
Trying to figure it out. Yeah, for sure.
yes, how can we say to youth, be strong about who you are and feel confident when they don't even know, yet uh, all of who their beautiful person is. So I think I think that's when you're not solid yet in yourself, because it's totally normal and understandable because you're youth. Well, it can really debalance you. It can really crush you easily because you're still not strong, and that's normal, right? So
Very true. Um, yeah, it's how do you, again, how do you just block out the noise and see it as noise and not, something that it is very hard to do. Easier said than done because you also love the positive, right? When someone says you look great, you're like, oh, have you lost weight? I mean, isn't that awful? I mean, that's like when like, wow, like I have, like, and that's like the biggest compliment. So why do we take that? And we'll dive a little more into that. I want to talk about no pressure here. You are, one of the reasons we're chatting with two young people is we want to talk about how this affects young people. How does this show up among your friends and your kind of peer circles? Have you seen it, uh, kinda in person, Kenzie?
Yeah, are you saying, the cyberbullying or the weight loss and
I
message?
think the weight loss, I have the body image and that kind of thing. Have you seen, and this kind of comparison and the pressure of food, body's appearance, how does that show up in kind of your social circles, your peer circles? Have you seen that among your friends? Have you witnessed that?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's really tough right now with the rise of Ozempic and GLP-1s. I think it's really, really hard. We're in a really hard chapter right now for body image. We were in a space of body positivity where people, were really trying to celebrate, their bodies at whatever size and, all of the nuances with that. And now we've kind of the pendulum has swung the other way. So, of course, it's really hard for people in my peer group right now, for content creators and um, other influencers, because for people who are plus size, there's a lot of pressure. They see like how much attention that other content creators get when they lose weight or when they're on Ozempic or anything like that. They see the praise that celebrities get, and sorry to focus in on Ozempic, but it's just such a big part of our culture right now. Um, there is sort of this underlying message with Ozempic that it reinforces the idea that, see, your weight really is just up to you. Like, you just really need the right medication, and then you'll just magically lose the weight and then keep it off forever, and you'll be saved in that way. And it's hard. We spent so many years online struggling to try to increase positive body image messaging, and now it's kind of like we've reverted back. So I feel like a lot of people feel pressured right now to look a certain way. A lot of people feel this like just really intense there's really intense body ideals coming back that people, are associating thin with health and so on. So it's really tough.
Thanks for sharing that. I'll tell you an old school story. This is before kind of social media showed up in that way. I used to work at the YMCA, and one of the beauties of the YMCA is that it really was. Um, we just welcomed everyone. Everyone was welcome. It was open, even though the whole Young Men's Christian Association, like the only thing that stood in that after today is just association. It's neither just young men or Christians. But it was beautiful that when you'd go there, you'd see people that look like you, right? Um, and you'd see representation. Now and so we had we had volunteer fitness instructors. And I remember we had a fitness instructor that didn't look like, someone, it wasn't ripped, it wasn't whatever, but she was one of our best instructors, incredible. People loved her classes, but one person came out and gave, I think it was general manager, well, how could you have someone who's not in shape teach and do? And that was the perception. Pride in my organization where she said, "I don't think this is the right space for you. I don't think it's the right place. You might be comfortable somewhere else." I took away her membership, like, yes, I'm working for the right place, core values, right? But, like, even then, unbelievable, like, seriously, like, how could you, that person is doing something so positive, and the number of people that she inspired, whatever, it just, and now with social media, of course, that imaging, right? It's right there. So, I think we wanna talk a little bit before we take a quick ad break. I wanna talk a little bit about some of the common misconceptions people have about eating disorders, because there are many, especially when it comes to young people. Kenzie, you wanna start us off?
Yes, absolutely. Such a good and important question. A lot of the time, when we close our eyes and when we think of someone who has an eating disorder, we often think of young, thin white women. And that is so harmful for us to kind of box in these ideas of what people look like when they have eating disorders, because eating disorders do not discriminate against age or size or gender or ethnicity. They affect everyone. And that is really important to know, because when we have that inclusive framing, it means that other people know that they are struggling with something, that they need to reach out for help. And so the biggest misconception that I think I would want to touch on is that it can happen to anyone, and that it doesn't discriminate what body size or what ethnicity or what gender or anything like that. And I think, like, specifically in the space that I'm in, a lot of times people think that plus size people are only binge eaters, that they're only binge eaters, and they kind of collapse the experience of us into one eating disorder category. So there's misconceptions around the fact that all plus size people have an eating disorder, and that really um, uh, that we're all specifically binge eaters or emotional eaters. And I think that that's really harmful too. I think that that creates a lot of stigma. And as we all know, as mental health advocates in this room, stigma decreases the chances of us getting help, of people getting help in general. And so I think having these more holistic perspectives on people, that eating disorders can affect anybody, that, you don't know what someone is struggling with just because you're looking at their body type, are those are the most important things in my head from where I come from.
Gabriela, do you wanna touch on that at all?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much. It is, yeah, eating disorders as a student that is studying nutrition right now. We see it every day, and we talk about it, and it's so important to talk about it, right? Because um, we, I started my university journey with a class in nutrition related to mental health, how nutrition can impact your mental health. And either, what quality of food you're eating, how much, all of that has an impact on your mental health, your the hormones that your brain produces. So now we're seeing a lot more of studies around how nutrition impacts mental health, right? Then we add this layer of relationship. What's your relationship with food? And as Kenzie said, our relationship food is unique to everyone. It doesn't discriminate. Everyone has his own really her his own its own relationship with food. So an eating disorder is created when there's this there's a disconnection between you and your food. You're not you are um, there's not a good relationship with food, right? Maybe it's because of the pressure, because of social norms, because you created, now you um, define the role of food as something to control or to escape your reality through food, escape a trauma, stress, emotions through food, right? So when food is used as something else than what food is, nourishment for our body, brain, and all everything, well, now you start developing a eating disorder, right? It can mean so many things, right? But I think a misconception around all of that is that uh, as Kenzie said, it's reduced to the body type you have when everyone can have a good relationship with food, even if, you are any size, any color, any gender. So I think the most important thing to think about is what is my relationship with food? Not seeing the external parts, not seeing my body, like um, yeah, what is my relationship with food and cultivating that and not creating food as a, a, another purpose, using food for another purpose than nourishing your body.
I love that, what both of you are saying around that relationship with food, and then I think that, the thought of, only someone like, you look at someone who you might see as overweight would have a eating disorder, right? Where there's lots of people, I mean, I was honest saying too, I have a brutal relationship with food, and where I'm eating something, not even enjoying it because 'cause I'm thinking of what I'm gonna eat next, right? Like, that is and I've gotta deal with that, that's mental health, right? That is something I've gotta work through, but people would never look at me, I don't think it'd be like, "Oh, that guy has a," but if I presented it a different way, absolutely, right, which isn't fair. So those misconceptions are just brutal, right? And so, yeah, you're either if you I think we put it in 2 categories. If we see you as either really overweight or underweight, you must have an eating disorder, there's no in between, but really it's about that relationship. So thank you both for that. Awesome conversation. We're gonna go to a quick break now and come right back.
Hi, I'm Angelica with Jack.org. Every day, we hear from young people across the country telling us the same thing. They didn't know how to ask for help with their mental health when they needed it most. Jack Ride is changing that, but only with your support. This May, join Canada's Ride for Youth Mental Health. You can cycle with us on Ride Day or move your own way anytime throughout May. Register today to lock in early bird pricing for just $75. Sign up today at Jack.org/ride and show youth they're not alone.
And we are back. Gabrielle, what messages about bodies or food do you wish adults understood better about what youth are experiencing right now?
Yes, such an important question. I think one thing I really wish adults understood is how much of this starts in the body and not just in the mind. I think we say to youth like it's all in your mind, it's your mental health. Like yes, like it is one part, but it also like the fact there's a fact during puberty your body releases hormones that actually makes you more aware of how you look and other people's body. So it's not just in our mind and not just the pressure of social media that is triggering and playing with our minds. It's really something that is happening internally in our hormones. So their brains of youth are wired to notice appearance more during this stage. So that alone can make you feel anxious and overwhelmed, right? So starting there, then now adding social media on top of that. So young people aren't just going through these changes privately, growing in their body as teenagers are changing, right? They're doing while being constantly exposed to messages about what is a good and healthy body, what you should look like, what's attractive, what's acceptable, what food is good or bad. We're always in these extremes when there's such a range. And unfortunately, those messages are everywhere. So you're constantly triggered by those messages. So, as I said before, teenagers are trying to make them make sense of themselves, but in a world that is constantly judging and comparing, unfortunately. So, I think adults sometimes underestimate how loud and constant that pressure really is when in the foundation of growing and developing and in that youth period, there's so many internal changes that are already happening. So it's not just in their head, it's literally in their bodies and how they're changing. So but this is where parents and adults really matter. Leading by example and modeling a healthy relationship with your own body, food, and health teaches your teen how to see themselves. Also, having open and judgment free conversations are super important. Showing support at home, so including sharing tools that are accessible for teenagers, makes a huge difference. So, I something also I want adults to understand is that they don't need all the answers. I think parents right now are overwhelmed also by all this. You don't need all the answers, just a willingness to show care and the willingness to listen and having those open conversation and that curiosity to learn and to seek tools for for your youth and teens at home is super important. And yeah.
No, thanks, and thank you for that. As a parent too, right? It is terrifying. And listen, folks, if you're listening and you want to know how do I even start those conversations with my kids, well, a good place to start is just do the Be There certificate. That kind of gives you those 5 rules of how to just engage and shut up and listen. I'm a fixer, right? So I made that mistake before where I tried to fix things instead of listening. Don't do that. Don't be me. But yeah, it is terrifying. But even when you're a parent too, Gabrielle, when I remember going out shopping for clothes for my girls, and like the stuff that they, that doesn't, it's not really, it's kind of a one size fits, like it doesn't fit for them. And in the being terrified as a dad to say, if I want them to be who they want, but if they wear this, I know people are going to be really cruel or whatever, and do this won't, all those things that go through your head, right? Where you want to be yourself, but you also are looking out for your kid. It is tough to be a parent. But Kenzie, I think you wanted to jump in there too about like how can adults show up better for young people?
Yeah, definitely. I actually think that this ties into something you were talking about earlier, of like snacking and kind of like overeating and how like sometimes it's so hard to stop and kind of how that addiction can sort of emerge. I think that the thing that I would love adults to know that they can model for their kids is the fact that like specifically in this conversation, uh like, our foods are designed to be addictive. Like, our foods are designed to hit the bliss point. There's a psychological I mean, I'm sure Gabriela is like, knows so much about this, because of what she goes to school for. But I think like The biggest thing that I wish that my parents modeled for me was forgiveness. So instead of being super hard on themselves, when it comes to the snacking or getting older and not feeling good about themselves anymore, that forgiveness is infectious. So being able for parents to sort of model what that looks like, having an awareness around why they're doing the things that they're doing and then talking about it. If my mom, had the kind of more of my mom or my dad, like either one of my parents had sort of more conversations with themselves that they said to, I'm struggling today because I don't know, I'm not feeling good with the weather and I haven't been able to move my body, but I know it's just a chapter, that stuff goes so far because I think that when parents have and when adults have those conversations with themselves, children and kids and teenagers and young adults all learn to also communicate with themselves. And they learn that you're a safe person to communicate. They learn that mom or dad or this adult or guardian or whoever can hold those conversations. And they're not going to be judgmental because they go through hard stuff too. So, really, that, that place of forgiveness, that place of having communication with themselves, I think goes so far in modeling and just really being, an infectious habit from themselves to other people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, brilliantly said. Like show a little vulnerability, be a real person, right? And they learn that. As Gabrielle, you were saying, that kind of role modeling too, right? Um, Both of you, what is, and we'll start with Gabriella. What has helped you cope with body image pressure in a healthier way? We talked about kind of what's pushes people together, but how do you cope through it moving forward? What have you done?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think for me and a lot of people, the biggest shift has been to learn to be kinder to ourselves, right? So, especially in a world where we're constantly seeing perfect bodies online, perfect bodies online, and trying to compare ourselves to that. What really helped me was realize that most of what we see on social media is in real life. As you said earlier, it's the lighting, it's filtered, it's edited. It's maybe I I see a lot of that, and I just want to integrate that because it's so important. There's a lot of young men and women and human beings that are in fitness competitions right now and bodybuilding. And I think they're going, the reality is they're going through phases, right? There's the bulk phase, there's the cut phase, there's 1 week before the competition, but all through this stage, they're showing up on social media and showing what they're eating, what their body looks like, and how cut it is, and everything. But the truth is, to get to those results, there's a hard reality of like not eating a lot, dehydrating your body. So it really can look really, really small. You're not eating, whole foods, a big plate, balanced plate. You're not nourishing your body at that point when you're in your cut phase, right? You have a lot of restriction around food. So I just want to say that because it's important, as Kenzie said before, to ask yourself questions when you see the social media content, right? Like, where is this person like coming from? Like, what's their reality? Maybe we don't know them, so and we don't know their reality, so why compare ourselves to them, right? So there's a lot of behind the scenes that we're not seeing in those videos and in those pictures. So try not to compare yourself with those videos and images because everyone has their own goals, their own relationship with food, their own relationship with their bodies, and they are in a different context in life than you. So really be aware of that and try not to compare, even if it's easier said than done. One thing also, I pay attention to how I talk to myself, right? Our words are so powerful, right? So now I'm doing the double standard technique. So I try to speak to myself the way I would speak to a friend, right? We always speak to a friend with more kindness, more compassion, less judgment. So let's do that, but with ourselves, right? Let's be aware of the words we use and empower ourselves and lift us up um, instead of crushing us, and instead of putting ourselves down with the words, even if it's tiny words. Sometimes like it can go so we can't even see them, but and we can't be aware of them, right? Because we just talk and talk and talk, like without realizing what we're saying and how it can affect us. So being more aware and more in tune with that is a big one. Another big one is becoming aware of how social media actually makes me feel. So on day to day, I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? um why am I using social media? Like, what's the purpose that I'm using social media? If I see a profile or a video, or I see, okay, is this making me feel good? Is this making me feel neutral or bad? So how does it make me feel? If it makes me feel bad and it's just ongoing profile that I'm seeing over and over again and it's just detrimental to my mental health, well, maybe unfollowing them, blocking them. You have the right to take decisions to protect your mental health and your peace and your confidence. So doing that is really important. And also community matters too. So being around people in real life who don't constantly comment on your body, and or your food, and maybe triggers that you may have, is really important. So and surrounding you with your vitamin people, the people that makes you feel good, who uplifts you, makes really a difference. And lastly, talking about it helps, right? So whether it's a parent, a friend, a teacher, or a health professional, it's really important to not holding it all inside. So body image pressure can feel heavy, but it gets lighter when you are not carrying it all alone. So as we all know, with mental health challenges, it's really important to seek that support when we need. So yes.
Kenzie, I'm going to throw that question over to you. How do you kind of show up and deal with that and cope with the kind of pressure of it all?
Mm. Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is because I do spend so much time online, who am I following? What's being curated in my feed? Because as much as we can abstract it, we're primates. What we see, we mimic. And I really genuinely believe that when we curate our feeds to be, wholesome and funny and curious and for it to reflect ourselves, I really think that not that it relieves, so 100% of the pressure or what we might struggle with online, but it becomes a much more loving and forgiving place. And so I follow people who look like me. I follow people who are doing cool things in the world that don't have anything to do with, dieting or exercise or fitting a specific body ideal. I try to follow incredible women who are doing, different things, mental health advocacy, doing human rights stuff. And that way that it makes my world bigger than just what I look like. So I'm not just following people just because I, want to follow people for their bodies or their hair or their makeup and none of that is inherently bad, but if I start to feel bad about myself, I have to change who I follow. So for me, it's really curating my feed, making sure that it's fun and that I get excited to go online and that I'm not feeling bad about myself. And then, of course, like Gabriela said, the community aspect, really like getting together for dinners, having people over, making sure that I'm doing that in person connection and I'm not getting so lost in the sauce online and stuff like that. So, the in-person community and curating my feeds is, two ways that I really, push back against all that pressure.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Yeah, the IRL counts, folks, because what you see online is not always the real thing. Final question. You both are so generous with your time, your thoughts, being open and honest and vulnerable. I appreciate that. Final question as we go. And we do this with all our guests. I want to end with this one big picture question is what are your hopes for the future of youth mental health in Canada? Kenzie, we'll start with you and finish with you, Gabriela.
Oh my gosh, what a great, open, loaded question. Because of course, I mean, like, alleviating all mental illness, having better mental health. Um, I hope that people oh my god. I have to narrow it down because there's a million things. I mean, I would love for young people and people in general to find more peace in things that are therapeutic. So, if people can't have access to therapy, what are we doing that is therapeutic? That is getting together with people in person. That's getting creative with our hands. That's gardening, that's going for walks, that's finding new parks, that's connecting with going to D&D. I started going to D&D this year. Who knows? I'm like ultra nerd right now. I'm in my nerd chapter. It's finding things that are therapeutic. And the way that I like to define that term is that I have fun and I'm at peace, right? There's something peaceful and fun and curious about the things that I'm doing. Therapy isn't accessible to everyone, but we can find things in our day to day that are therapeutic. I hope that we find more peace in that sense. And I'd love to see mental health and mental illness stats like go down really. I mean, people who can talk to parents more or less, cyberbullying, people who are struggling less, getting off their phones more, being more in person. I mean, like just a million and one things. I hope for a better future and a more positive one. Yeah.
Very hopeful. Love it. Gabriella, what are your hopes for the future?
Yes, I am talking not just by my own perception and what I would hope for, but I'm talking as a network rep. So I've been a network representative for Jack.org last year and then this year. And our cohort, after hearing the voices of my fellow reps, we really all came back to three major hopes for the future of Youth Mental Health Canada. So, first, we're hoping for a government system that's built with youth. So, not just for youth, but with policies shaped by lived experience in a realistic and practical way. Second, we hope mental health becomes more accessible, free, culturally relevant, and culturally competent. So, and also available 24/7, no matter where you live. So, we're seeing a lot of difficulty to access mental health right now in rural and remote communities. So, we hope that these communities all over Canada, all over the world, have access to those mental health resources. And lastly, we hope that mental health is discussed more openly and proactively. That's the power of these podcasts and the talks that we're doing at Jack.org, right? So, in schools, in our communities, and also in our everyday life, right? When you sit at a table with your family or with your chosen family, with your friends, ask them, how you're doing, how you're feeling, like, how's your mental health? How are you navigating life? Like, how are you feeling? I'm just here to listen, right? So having those conversation. So, right, in order to give younger folks the tools and the language to really talk about what they're feeling and feeling safe while doing it, right? The more we have those conversations, the more youth can hear them and be in tune with the language that we're using it and saying, oh, wow, yeah, that's how I feel. And then when someone asks them how they're feeling, they can have this language and all those tools and vocabulary to express themselves.
Incredible. Thank you. You know what gives me great hope? The two of you and all the young people we have on Jack Amplified is incredible because the future is very, very bright. In a world where you're just bombarded with negativity, I see how brilliant and insightful and passionate our young Canadians are. It's incredible to see. And so I'm thinking we're going to be all right. and you are going to be all right. Great conversation with two wonderful people who were vulnerable and use their own lived experience, and both in education, in life. We talked about how adults could show up for young people. We talked about the effects of social media, how it's both positive, that had positive effects, but also can have a negative side, and the importance of just kind of the community you surround yourself with, right? And hey, sometimes you need to step offline and get together with your friends or that community to really experience real life and the support that you need to push forward. Like every episode of Jack Amplified, this was incredible. Some great insights. Hopefully, you found it a little inspiring. I sure did. We could talk for hours, but I want to respect my guest time. Thank you so much, Kenzie and Gabriela, for showing up today and showing up huge for youth across this country, for amplifying the voice of youth. Is so appreciated.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Remember, folks, to like, rate, and subscribe. We want to grow this. The only way to build that community across Canada, around the world, is to share, and keep the communication going. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on Jack Amplified.